Hello and welcome back to the Claret Blue podcast, sponsored by NordVPN. If you want the best discount code available, there is a scrumptious discount code in the description down below. I'm your host for this one, Dan Rolinson, joined by John Townley for the first time since the Everton preview. John, you and I are generally on the podcast more often than not, but me and Kendrick have done the last three together, which has been great fun. I don't know if you've listened to it, but you're back from Switzerland, from Aston Villa's Champions League winning first match, which is the worst way to word it possible. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks, Dan. The games are coming thick and fast at the moment. As we said a couple of weeks ago, we're now going to be into that kind of period of the season where, yes, there's lots of international breaks, but at the same time, we are obviously in the Champions League. We've got the Carabao Cup coming now as well. I think we play another 5 games before the October international break in a 2-week period, which sounds mental. We've already had, I can't remember how many games we've had. I think if you're an international player, you would have already played a silly amount of games already, and there's a lot being said about that. I'm only talking about because I've just been writing a piece from what John McGinn's been saying. I don't know if we have any questions on that straight away, but I like it as a reporter because there's lots to go at, and you're in the action straight away. You know, I always like the midweek games because it means you've got a press conference, a chance to speak to Unai, and then the match, obviously, more exposure to the team and more like access and whatnot. So yeah, I'm doing really well, really enjoying it.
Yeah, I'd much prefer to be in this busy period where there's 5 games in 2 weeks than the 2 weeks of international break where we're scrabbling around going, oh, what should we do on the podcast this week? Oh, it's rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so Q&A session then. Obviously, we normally do these Mondays, but for obvious reasons this week we didn't. But we still wanted to commit to doing an episode because we both really enjoy this. I think this is probably our most popular piece of content now. We'll start first of all with Sam, who says, what was the food like in Switzerland? Did John try anything new? Now, I replied to Sam on Twitter saying, we both know the answer to that, and the answer is no.
Okay, I don't want to... I feel like I'm branded as someone who eats like 2 things in my life. Firstly, Switzerland, as everyone who went there would have found out, and I mean, everyone knew anyway, it's very, very expensive. So, I took a connecting flight back home through Frankfurt, and I bought 2 or 3 things there, food-wise, because it was just like half the price of what it would have been in Zurich or Bern. The food, I didn't really... What did I eat? I had bread and ham. A sandwich, should I say? Those are the 2 things that make a sandwich.
Bread and butter and ham, yeah, go on.
After the game, got that from Aldi. There was an Aldi opposite me. The food they did during the match, I don't know what it was. It looked like pasta, but then they were putting, I don't know what, I didn't try it. So, really, I have no place to talk about Swiss food because firstly, I didn't want to spend money on it. And secondly, I didn't try it. So if it was, reasonably priced, I'd be up for it, as I would on all these trips, by the way.
Well, hang on a minute. The press food was free. You didn't try that?
Yeah, true. Yeah, but it didn't look very good. It didn't look like my bag at all. I'm not even sure what it was. It was like a creamy pasta thing. But then they put this I don't know what it was, like orange sauce or something on it. And then I don't know what else, maybe onions, crispy onions or something, I'm not sure.
Sounds decent, to be honest. A second question, I've got to get this out of the way, and I'll tell you first of all that when I do the tweet to ask for questions, obviously we get X amount of replies. I think it was 30 odd for this one, but this was the top comment, had 54 likes. So a good question you would consider, that's pretty good going. From Alberto Solano.
Solano is always in the Q&A comment. It's what name?
How many teams come away from the Wankdorf with a clean sheet?
Oh my God. I don't have the stats to hand of how many clean sheets I've kept. I don't actually think it was a serious question though, was it? So.
No, it wasn't. Let's move on to some actual football conversation. DJ says, have we finally seen enough to know we are going to be okay without Douglas Luiz? Tielemans, Onana, McGinn, Kamara to come back soon seems to show that we have enough quality and depth in the middle. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I said as when we sold Luiz, firstly, we had to sell him. I think everyone's aware of that now, especially after we spoke to Damian and Monchi about how serious the situation was. And Villa, as we said before, they had to find a buyer for him, and no one was really willing to help because why would you when Villa are a close digit points deduction? So rules out of Premier League side going for him. So in the end, I think Villa had almost the best deal possible. And there's a lot being said about, the Ealing Junior and Barrenechea stuff as well. They've both go out on loan. What does that mean? Well, again, direct you to the piece of what Villa's two chiefs said there, Monchi and Vidigani, because they're in a situation where they, hands tied behind the back, they had to do something, and I think in the end they coped with it very well. Tielemans was signed knowing 18 months before Luiz left that he would be one of the players who were, under consideration to depart, and I think we knew that, to be honest, even at the start of last season, that okay, he has 2 years remaining on his deal next summer, or this summer, or last summer now. Jesus, I'm getting mixed up here. And that they didn't want to sell, obviously, a Martinez, Watkins, the absolute crucial players, Conser as well. You could probably throw Bailey into that mix too. But Luiz, 2 years left on his deal, a player that Villa could sell. And obviously, it happened. Tielemans came in for free, Barkley came in for a very small fee as well. And I think we've done very well to prepare for that. We spoke previously, didn't we, Dan, about, well, if we were in a situation where we didn't sign Tielemans because we had no foresight that Luiz was going to go, then we would have been left in a situation where Luiz goes for £42 million, and then we're scrambling around to buy a replacement. Tielemans is what, £50 million, maybe even more, I don't know, pound player. That already is a negative net spend, and then you don't even have Barkley in that situation either, because again, we did the Barkley deal because we wanted more depth. So I think we did very well in the Luiz saga. I think it's very easy to look at it and think, oh, you're only selling for 40 and you bought two players who aren't even playing for you now. But that process began much earlier. You have to factor in Tielemans and Barkley into that. So I think the midfield is looking very good. Obviously, Onana comes in as well. We have a really, can you have a good headache? But it's a good problem to have when you're thinking, well, Kamara's coming back as well, one of the best holding midfielders in the league, or certainly was before his injury. And his injury, although it was an ACL, was the lowest degree of ACL essentially. A lot of people were saying, he's come back. How has he come back so soon? Well, he has been out for 7 months or something. And if that was over the course of a season, that would feel like the whole season, pretty much. But it wasn't anything like Mings's injury, or even Buendia's really. So he'll be coming back. What does that mean for Tielemans, Onana, McGinn? There's a lot of options there for Emery, but also a lot of debate, I think, that we'll be having in the coming weeks of what happens to this player. How does that disrupt the dynamic? Even someone like Bailey, who's coming back for the Wolves game, what does that mean for Rodgers and Ramsey? And then you've got McGinn on the right. There's a lot there to look at. Philogene wasn't in the squad. He'll be coming back, hopefully, into full fitness soon enough. There's a lot to go out there, and there'll be questions of who plays where.
We won't be having that debate in the coming weeks. We'll be having it in the coming minutes, John, because the next question is from LCE, who says, given our returning players from injury, the midfield area looks superb. Who of the current starting four do you feel is at most risk of losing their place?
I can't leave Leon Bailey out of my starting 11. I just can't. I think he's so important, and I know we've obviously coped well without him in the Young Boys match, but so Bailey's in there for me. McGinn, I can't leave McGinn out either, because it's so difficult. It really isn't a question I want to answer. What I would say is Onana, and I really liked this last weekend. Clearly, Onana was having a poor game against Everton, and they matched him up. There's probably extra bite because it was Onana and he said a couple of things about Everton, and maybe even for Onana, he probably maybe overthought that game. He's only 22 still, so he's kind of lacking that experience. We know he's a fantastic player, but against Everton, he wasn't very good. And Villa did need a different profile of player in that match, and Emery didn't think twice about to bring him off. And I really liked that. And Onana's reaction to that was absolutely superb as well, celebrating goals on the bench like he had scored himself. And then in the Young Boys game, is superb and plays a key role in a difficult circumstance on that pitch. Played very well against with Tielemans. So at the moment, it feels like an impossible question, and I really don't have the answer. But what I like is that Emery, there'll be no sentiment with any of this. He'll put the players on the pitch that he thinks will do best in that moment. And then if it's not working, he'll change it at half time or in the 60th minute. And you trust him to make that correct decision. Because honestly, I think if we didn't bring Barkley on, I don't think we'd beat Everton, or there'd be a slim chance afterwards, because we were 2-0 down, or 2-1 down, sorry. But Everton had great chances themselves, but we had to control the game, which gives obviously Everton less opportunities to score in the second half and us more territory, more chances to score ourselves. And that control we didn't have with Onana. And Emery said after the match as well, he's still learning our structure, and we're going to kind of give him the best support to become the player that we want him to become, essentially. So yeah, whatever happens, I'm happy with obviously the options that we have, but also the management of them as well. It's very difficult to pick out a 4, because even if you ask me, if you're playing a cup final tomorrow and you've got a fully fit team, what would you do? I'd probably say, well, who are we playing against and how do they play? That's probably the answer, which sounds very like, how do I say it? Like a very up-to-date woke answer almost, because everyone wants to know, well, what's your best 11? But that doesn't exist anymore. Like, we know that formations don't really exist. It's a completely fluid thing now. And even the players on the bench are just as important as the players who are starting, as we saw against Everton. So it's really not the answer that anyone would want from me or the person who asked the question. But yeah, you kind of say everyone's got the right to start, but it depends what we're playing against and who would come off the bench as well to finish the game stronger than the other one.
Yeah, I think the idea of just picking what is the best 4, the best 11 as a whole team, you're right, it's very much dependent on the opponent. But also, that's not how football works. There's the context of where that game is placed within the season. The best 11 to play Young Boys is not necessarily the best 11 to beat Wolves. And then you've got Wickham just after, so there's chance for other players to play anyway. The Leon Bailey situation that we're going through at the moment of an injury of 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, or 2 or 3 games, means that for you he's in your best 11 or whatever. But at the moment he's not, and we're winning without him because we've got other options, and that allows us to do different things. McGinn will be injured for 3 or 4 games, and someone else comes in, and it's their go to play. Basically, it's their turn, and if they're kind of like raring to go because they've not had their moment and they've got to grasp it, that's a good thing for Aston Villa.
I would like to make a point about Philogene though. And I know that, for example, last season, Tielemans, he looked a little bit lost, which is crazy to think about considering how good he is right now. Arguably, I'd definitely say our best player at the start of the season. And we've had Rodgers playing very well, Duran doing what he's doing, Anana as well. But I think Tielemans has been, in every match, he's had a shout to be man of the match.
Yeah.
With Philogene, and sorry, I mentioned Tielemans because this time last year, obviously, it took him a while to settle, didn't quite look correct in our structure and system. But my only thing with Philogene right now is, obviously, the club believe in him massively, his potential. They knew they made a mistake as soon as they sold him, and they really wanted to get him back. They did, happy days. But Philogene wants to be playing football, as we saw last summer. He wasn't happy to sit around. He needs to be playing, and he said it himself that you can't sit on a bench at this point in his development. And yes, we're very early in the season. He's had a couple of injuries, but even in previous matches when he could have been playing, McGinn would play there, and I think a lot of people would have probably picked McGinn anyway to play in that role because he does it well. I'm not too sold where he's going to feature as the season goes on. I think he'll be playing, of course, but I'm struggling to think when he's going to be starting matches, if at all. Firstly, because you've got Bailey, who's a tremendous player. But then even if Bailey isn't available, then would McGinn be playing there? Would Tielemans be playing there? As we've just said, there's already a lot of competition for McGinn to be playing in that midfield role when you've got Tielemans, Barkley, Anana, Kamara's coming back. There's so much there that it seems like Philogene is almost the player who's missing out, or I think will miss out as we kind of go on. I'm just struggling to see exactly where he fits in, but certainly coming off the bench, I can see him making a very good impact, absolutely. But as he said before, at his stage of his development, he wants to be playing, and for this season, I'm not too sure he will be playing as much as he'd like to. Whether that changes the following season and as we go on, maybe it does, and that's great because he's obviously a young player still. And as I say, Villa have got huge belief in his ability, as do I, as do a lot of fans. I think he's a fantastic player and very exciting as well. So I was delighted when we brought him back. But right now, I just think he's probably going to have to take this as okay, I'm back at Villa, but I could be playing elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? I don't want that to sound negative. It just feels like he could be the one who drops out of the thinking because of all the options that we have. And I know injuries will happen. Bailey has been out, midfielders have been out, but McGinn still keeps that spot. I don't know.
I think there's opportunity for different teams to play in different moments when Villa want different things. There's another question, if I can find it in a second, about like offering a different option going forward. Ralph, do you think we missed something on the right with McGinn playing narrow and Bogard reluctant to go forward? Can't help but feel like Bailey or Philogene would have had minutes if fit. I think the combination of not being quite fit and it being early in the season are absolutely things to bring into consideration. There's also a little bit and this isn't obviously true of everyone because Onana has played in every game, but maybe that's slightly different. But the kind of thing of coming into an Emery side for the first time and getting up to speed a little bit. Like I thought Maatsen would have been starting games by now, and he still isn't. I know it's only the fourth or fifth game, but even so, we've spent good money on him. Philogene the same. Tielemans last year didn't just come in straight away, so there's kind of this little bit of a bedding in period, if you like. So maybe Philogene, he had pre-season last year as well. But do you know what I mean? Maybe that's an option as well. Maybe McGinn playing in these early games, we needed more control than just an out-and-out winger that Philogene is. So McGinn is better suited, whereas maybe for Wolves, Philogene is the option and we need something slightly different. So I think Villa will look different in different games, and that's when this squad that we've got will become better utilised.
Yeah, and we're so early in the season. I'm definitely not suggesting that he's not going to be playing. I can see that there are quite a few different options that Emery would want to go with ahead of Philogene, at least at the moment. But then even if Philogene starts to develop over the season, which great, I just still think starting matches is going to be really difficult for him, unless injuries happen, and obviously we don't want that, but they could. So yeah, like even last year, Bailey was doing well off the bench, but no one thought he'd be becoming the player that he has, really, because you obviously had Diaby. So a lot can change. It's just sitting here right now, I'm thinking McGinn will probably start most games. So will Bailey, one of the first names on the team sheet, I'd have thought. It just leaves Philogene in a bit of an awkward situation. But you're right. Against Young Boys, McGinn and Bogard, we were quite narrow. And maybe Philogene, again, I don't think he'd be starting. But if that game happened later in the year, he probably would. We'll find out.
Just going back to midfield, a question from the villain in New York City. Hi both, love the podcast, keep up the great work. Thank you. I think it's safe to say that as a fan base, we all agree that Youri Tielemans has been sensational so far. I don't think I've seen a better passer of the ball at Villa. Where does he rank amongst Villa's central midfielders over the years?
Oh,
very highly to begin with. Like, rather than just put a number on it of like, oh, he's top three, like he's right up there. He's very, very good.
Well, put it this way: when we did I think it was this time last year, Dan, when we did our Premier League all-time 11 for Villa, I was thinking, even a couple of weeks after that, I was thinking, well, Louise probably gets in that now. I think I had Barry and did I have Petrov maybe? And I'm not
Taylor.
Sure. I can't. Yeah, maybe I had Ian Taylor. I can't quite remember, to be honest. But I was thinking, well, actually, Louise probably gets in that. Maybe. I know Barry had a lot of longevity and is a sensational player, but we did finish fourth last season and went to a European final. Season we're doing very well as well, and Tielemans has kind of just taken over. He's a sensational footballer, so good to watch and extremely intelligent. He's not quick. I think everyone knows that, and kind of criticised by Leicester fans for not having the fitness required, or all of that sort of stuff. But you feel like he could be playing into his mid-30s potentially. I know we started very early at maybe at 16 years old, and then with question marks. Is he going to have a shorter, or is he going to finish his career earlier than most players because he's been playing for so long? Maybe injuries will come later. I don't know, but he plays his football, obviously with his brain. He's a very intelligent footballer, and yeah, it's great to watch as well. I like how he can slip in and out of challenges as well, that sort of stuff. Like, he's not physically great, but his technique is superb, and on that pitch as well. I don't know if it quite came through when you're watching it on TV. I'm sure it did, but where I was sat in the press box, quite low down, close to the pitch, you could really tell how intense the game was on the AstroTurf. The ball was zipping around, and I know a lot of people probably play 5-a-side on Astro, and the ball can move quite quickly sometimes, but they were watering it before the match, and it was skidding like it was almost like a hockey pitch. I don't know what the AstroTurf is called, whether it's 3G or 4G, I can't remember now. But it almost had like that effect. So you'd have like Rodgers and Ramsey kind of, turning in and out of tackles, but then the ball basically going past them. But as soon as it went to Tielemans, it just stopped dead. So yeah, technically one of the best players we've had in an awful long time. I said Louise was our best player last season. Maybe I was being harsh on Tielemans at the time, but to be fair, he wasn't really playing. Tielemans will be right up there as one of our best midfielders that we've had. Yeah, in the last 2 decades.
Not a question sent in on the Q&A, but something that I wanted to ask you as a kind of hypothetical. I don't know why I've put this in the running order at this point, because there's still other football things I wanted to talk about. But obviously the trial of Man City versus the Premier League has begun this week, and will hopefully have some kind of resolution at some point. with Man City being punished or not punished, whether they're guilty or not guilty. There's so many different variables, but there's a lot of the big social media accounts talking about potential punishment for Man City and all this kind of stuff. Bear with me, I'll be getting to a Villa point in a moment. And there was a suggestion of, not that this will be a punishment, but from a fan that was saying, well, if Man City didn't win the things they've won and it went to their opponents, so the league title they won in 2018 would actually go to Liverpool or whatever, that the 2020 League Cup final would go to Villa, obviously as runners-up. If that was the case, Man City are punished and stripped of everything and Villa are awarded a League Cup win, how would you feel about that?
We haven't won it. It's I get it. They treat you to win it, but it would be hilarious. It would be like, oh, it's in the records, but there's no getting away from the fact that we lost the final. Like it doesn't feel right. That would be like Liverpool. How many titles would Liverpool have won? Arsenal
I think it gives them another 3. It gives Man United 1. Champions League would have gone to Inter. Like all those things would have changed. Arsenal won it last year, yeah. But just to see the record books of Villa winning a trophy in 2020 when we obviously didn't win the game, like, is the drought over?
I mean, technically it would be, I suppose, but then you could have no how do I say? There's no bragging rights for it though, because you haven't done it properly.
So we have a 4-year late open bus parade.
Yeah, bring Bjorn Engels back. Go on, Alex legends. I want to win. It wouldn't change how I feel about winning something now, if that makes sense. I wouldn't think, we did, we've done that, and the relief that we finally won something. That would not happen. That would happen if we think under Emery properly. It would just be more of a, all right, okay, that happened, but yeah, like there'll be much more feelings from other fans. I think if Arsenal, for example, were then given the league, I think that would actually mean much more to them, because
would it though?
I think it would. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the League Cup is obviously a bit more flippant. We're kind of joking about it, but even if we were awarded a league that we didn't actually win, I don't know.
But do you know what? Because the league is so how do I put it? So draining. And you're doing it over 38 games. How draining was that season for us, and emotionally taxing? Like fantastic, but also every week trying to win a game. And we finished, I don't know how many points out of City and Arsenal, maybe like 20 to 30 points or something, which is crazy. But for them to have done that, I don't know. I feel like you'd have much more resentment to City, knowing that they've cheated for 2 years to stop you winning a league when you've come that close and worked so hard. Whereas for us in the League Cup, I know it was also not as recent as Arsenal, but it felt more like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, but I just think the league stuff is much more, you would be more inclined to claim that, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
Totally pointless. Probably will never happen, but I was scrolling through social media before we started and I thought, I'll ask John that, see what he thinks.
It's a good point, because if City do get stripped and whatever, then they've got to go to someone, haven't they?
I think if they were to be punished in that sense, rather than it just go to the opposition, it'd be that Man City have still won X amount of Premier Leagues, but they did it. I don't know. I don't want to get into this. Doesn't matter. Let's move on. There's a couple of questions about Bogard, kind of like how we judge him at this early stage of the season. I want to wait till after Wolves, give him one more game potentially if he plays. We do a Q&A every Monday. We'll be doing another on Monday. So I'll save that question for then. Gives us one more game to talk about as well if he plays. And it's still relatively early days. So Adam says, John reported a while ago about a council planning permissions meeting regarding adding buildings to Bodymoor Heath, for example, a hotel. Do you have any update?
No update as such. But as far as I know, that's all going ahead still. It is interesting though, the hotel stuff. I think it was reported maybe even last year that Villa had planned to do it, and obviously now they're going through the obviously the legal process with it all. So yeah, I mean, like just coming back from who did we play, Dan? Playing Young Boys. Coming back from that game, obviously the players come back on the night and then they'd be in bed, I don't know, 2 a.m, 3 a.m.
Did they travel back on Tuesday night?
Yes, they travel back. So that's why they're doing the hotel stuff. So basically the players can come back, and the staff, anyone that's been out there, come back, go to the Bodymoor hotel, sleep there, and they have their full night's sleep, and then they're already in Bodymoor, so they can do any tests they need to do the next day, have the breakfast there, nutritious breakfast, all that stuff. Whereas if you're then driving home or going home after a match in the early hours, obviously that impacts the next day. And with how many games we were playing in Europe, that obviously has a knock-on effect of preparation for the next matches. Granted, that's not as bad, I don't think, as Europa Conference League or the Europa League, where it's a Thursday, then you have the Friday, and obviously the Saturday. So 2 matches, essentially. Now it's a case of sometimes you may have 3, which helps. Like, preparing for Wolves won't be that bad, I don't think, because obviously we had Wednesday as a recovery day, then you have Thursday and Friday to prepare for the 3 o'clock kickoff, which is a good amount of rest, really. But yeah, some nice plans there. Plans as well to improve the women's facilities too, which is good. You know, Bodymoor is a complex, not just building a hotel and 40 bedrooms. But yeah, exciting stuff for the people who.
Do you know whether any other clubs in the Premier League have a hotel kind of bedroom facilities at their training ground?
I don't know for certain, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of facility for either City or even United. I think United do, actually. But going to at least a City training complex, if they don't have bedrooms there, I'd be shocked, because that place
they've got everything else, haven't they? Yeah. Okay. Question from Milton, who I know for a fact will be buzzing that this has been read out because he's badgered me to do so. He says, I asked John this previously, but he did not respond. Naughty.
Sorry, Milton. I don't. If this is on Twitter, I don't look at my notifications. So.
What I will say is, I replied to Milton's tweet saying, "Really, laughing face?" Because I've kind of felt like it was a joke. So I don't kind of don't feel bad that you've missed something serious here. Because I don't know whether this is even worth talking about. Does John think Kamara will have a haircut before returning to first team action? His hair has become noticeably longer since his injury, and my concern is that it will affect his performance.
I don't know the answer to this question. I presume he will, because he hasn't had that long hair before. And it sounds like a silly question, but I can understand it. Like Cucurella, it frustrates me watching him play because he's constantly doing this. Like, it's so jarring watching him because, like, just cut your hair, man. Who else does it? Guendouzi as well. Like, 2 good players, like, considering their level. They're Champions League players playing for the national teams and stuff. It's such a silly question, but I do understand it from Milton.
Do you think this is just like I'll let my hair grow while I'm injured, and I'll cut it when I'm back?
Almost like a lockdown vibes when every player let his hair grow out, and Ashley Young grew his hair out, and everyone was like, "Wait,
Ashley Young has hair." He was bald by choice this whole time.
Yeah, I think he'll have a haircut, because I can imagine that would be annoying to play with. Unless he's doing it as like a fashion statement, and he's got like a new deal with a company. I don't know. You've seen Declan Rice walking down the touchline in the Emirates.
London Fashion Week thing.
Was it? Yeah, that was interesting.
Right, a couple more. Mark says, what do you feel would now be considered a reasonably successful season, knowing what we know now about our start? Because obviously there's a lot of talk about it'll be a slow start and all this kind of stuff, and it hasn't been that. Does that change anything for you about our aspirations? Can you genuinely see us going for a title challenge or anything, or is it way too early to be changing what you thought anyway?
I still think what I thought before. Qualification for Europe and having a good stab at the Champions League. I am not going to cry if we don't get the Champions League again, or
I might
not. Yeah, possibly. Again, depends how it's done. We do go to Old Trafford on the last day, and I keep thinking about that. It's really niggling at me, that is. I think we should have enough to finish in a qualification place for the playoffs for the Champions League. I'd like to think we do. And then we'll see who we get in the round of 16. If we get some like a PSV, then yeah, let's go at them. If we get a much harder team, and I don't know, say Inter Milan fall out of the top 9 or whatever, and we have to play them home and away, that would mean we obviously haven't done very well, in terms of the that bracket of teams. But we'll see. In terms of the league, European qualification, I think as the season goes on, we'll be able to judge exactly where we are. I know a lot of people say 10 games in, where are you? I always say the first half of the season, which sounds like a long time, but a lot can change. Like, look at Chelsea, what they did last year.
Newcastle as well, much better in the second half.
They finished only a few points behind us in the end, which is crazy to think. So first half of the season, we'll be able to notice, okay, here's where we're going to be competing, but also those other teams, if they have made a slow start, we know that they can chase us. So yeah, I just like the amount of depth that we have in the team. Even though we've had a couple of injuries already this season, we've coped pretty well, and obviously Mings and Kamara coming back too. So yeah, my aspirations haven't changed, even though we've had a good start.
Sam says, Unai Emery seemed to lose his patience in the post-match press conference with the journalists asking questions regarding John Duran. Do you ever worry about upsetting him with your questions? It sounds like a bit of a joke question, but it's fair. It's a decent point. Like, have you ever thought, like, I shouldn't ask that because he doesn't seem in a great mood or anything?
I think the issue here is that Villa are back in the Champions League, huge. Their first game is against Young Boys, a banana skin, I'd probably say. But personally, anyway, the game was done at half time for me. And I didn't know this, but Emery had lost. Sorry, Emery's Villarreal, I think, went to Young Boys and were winning 2-0 at half time, just like Villa. But then went on to draw the match 2-2. Young Boys came back, but this felt different. Young Boys are not a very good team. And I know, it's the start of the season and they're bottom, but they've played 6 games. That's more than enough to suggest that they're not very good in comparison to us. Not even just comparing them to Servette, who are top of the division. So, yeah, we were going there thinking we're probably going to win this game. And at half-time, we deserved to have wrapped it up already. We could have won 5-0. I felt like almost the talking point after the match wasn't that Villa had won their first game in the Champions League. And I know it might sound a bit crazy, but when John Duran comes off the bench and scores again, even though it was ruled out, and then proceeds to celebrate for the Young Boys ultras, that is a massive talking point there, because obviously a lot has been said about his behaviour, his attitude, etc., and just how crazy he can be. That kind of epitomised John Duran. So in the press conference, I think everyone, how do I say it? The most newsworthy thing there was John Duran's celebration, essentially, even though, yes, Villa won 3-0. To kind of give a journalistic kind of opinion, if we write about Villa's win, of course, great. But really, how much can you take from that game when they've gifted you a second goal? We've had 2 goals ruled out for VAR. It took us 20 minutes to kind of adapt, but they didn't even take advantage of it. I just felt like there was a huge gulf in quality there, if I'm being totally honest, to the point where there wasn't much to really take away from it apart from the 3 points, which is fantastic. And we're absolutely delighted. I was happy as anything after the game. So were the fans, great chance in the away end, etc. Fantastic away day. But in terms of the football, we know that we're going to get so many more harder tests than that. And for Emery, then going to his press conference, he probably thought, I'm anticipating Duran questions, but I want to talk about the football because we've just won 3-0 in our first Champions League game. We've done well. We didn't slip up here. We did a mature professional performance. Fantastic. We scored goals, clean sheet as well. But those questions were never going to come, I don't think. And instead, obviously, Duran was the topic. And I think he didn't really want to talk about it. Firstly, because he was probably a bit annoyed, to be honest, in Duran, because, he's been saying he's matured, his behaviour's improving, which is absolutely true, by the way, because at Bodymoor, he's turning heads. Like everything I've been told anyway at Bodymoor, you wouldn't believe what you're seeing. And we are, to be fair, starting to see that in games now.
Yeah.
Attitude to other people and how he's holding himself around the place has improved immeasurably. And even John McGinn said that as well. Then to kind of, provoke the ultras when there was no real need. It was, as Emery said, it wasn't serious, probably quite predictable, but at the same time, not really ideal because it kind of takes the shine away a little bit, I think, from the win, really. And I think a lot of Villa fans, kind of laugh and joke about it. And as do I think it's, John Duran personified and it doesn't really matter. But it did take away from like the main talking point, what should have been Villa have returned to Europe. And obviously the first match after Gary Shaw as well. Obviously that was a huge talking point as well. But kind of on the pitch as such, the Duran stuff was probably more newsworthy, shall I say. So that's why the question. And I can see why Emery was annoyed. So, yeah.
The line that people are after is something along the lines of, and Emery's not going to do this. So like, he's played well, he's scored the goals, but he's still a bit of a problem. But which isn't true, but you know what I mean. Like that's the angle that people are kind of digging towards.
I think that was one of the questions that was asked. It was, he obviously said a lot about Duran maturing, but does this show that he's got a bit more to do, which is absolutely fair. But then he's obviously asked a couple more as well. So yeah, like not a big issue, and Emery will be absolutely fine in his presser ahead of Wolves.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit mardy that we've won 3-0 here. dedicate the win to Gary Shaw, fantastic. But then the kind of follow-up questions are about Duran, because that is what may get the best response, I think, or the best headline as such from Unai.
Unai said in the press conference something like, I want to analyse the football, not talk about this kind of stuff, which is absolutely fine. But like you said, there's only so many kind of column inches, if you like, that you can get out of Villa winning the game they were expected to. Tuesday against Wickham, if Villa win 5-0, there's only so much you can say about the game, really. That's pretty expected. If John Duran does something quote unquote silly during that game, again, that is the kind of angle that you go towards. And I say Duran, anybody really, if there's something else, if there's kind of another thing
out of the ordinary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I kind of get it. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, like if Villa beat Bayern, for example, and John Duran, there's a celebration in front of the Bayern fans. No one really cares about the John Duran stuff there, because the more I didn't expect that thing as such would be Villa beating Bayern, but Villa beating Young was expected 90 minutes before Emery did his press conference, basically. So yeah, it's not like this isn't. We've probably spoken about it far too much than what we had to, really. But I get the question about why he was annoyed. But yeah, it's not an issue, and just kind of trying to explain about it, I guess.
Yeah, well, the original question was, do you ever worry about it? Like if your question, if you had not asked yours at that point, which I don't think you had, you asked about Watkins, didn't you? Because I've seen the clip. If your question was originally about Duran, do you think, well, I won't ask that now because the last one didn't go down well?
You know what? Probably, because I think you need to kind of read the room, and that Emery, if he said his bit, and then I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Swiss reporters asked him about Duran, I think, which probably provoked it a little bit, because it was like, this isn't. He said what he said about Duran, and then don't think there was anything else to say. But maybe the Swiss reporter, who hadn't been in an Emirates company before, probably didn't know that, if he said his bit, he said his bit. So there's no more to milk out of the situation, essentially.
Chelt Villa says, we've got the world's number one, Concer's a Rolls Royce, Powell has changed the way we play, Dean, we most agree, had a brilliant season, so why is our defence so bad? We can see goals from all areas, and the answer cannot just be down to not having Boubacar Kamara. Is it time to change the back four?
Yeah, can I bring up a stat for you quickly?
Go on then.
Between March and Christmas 2023, Aston Villa conceded just 8 goals in 16 Premier League games, so that's half a goal a game, essentially, and never more than once in a match in that time. Since then, they've conceded 26 goals in 12 games, which is 2.2 per game, conceding at least twice in 10 of those matches, including each in their last 4.
That is in the Kamara time frame.
Yeah, so that kind of, there is that, and I think that is the obvious answer. However, the question is correct. We still have a lot of quality in our back four. Anana is now in there as well, and yes, his defensive capabilities aren't as good as Kamara's. Yes, but I don't know. I mean, this is obviously an issue for us. We are scoring goals as well, and our results at the start of this season, even though we are shipping goals, have been very good. So I'm not too concerned about it. However, it doesn't feel very sustainable. It feels like at some point we won't come back against Everton, or I know we did against Brentford when we went 3-2 down and then got it back to 3-3, but couldn't get the 4th goal. But there'll be games where we don't come back at all, and those will be the ones that could cost you at the end of the season. So it's obviously the major issue that we're trying to combat at the moment. That's why I think when Kamara comes back, he will be back in the 11. But then, goodness me, think about leaving Tielemans out at the moment, or an Arna. It doesn't work. So it's, there's going to have to be more than just Kamara coming back for us to improve in that department. I don't have the answers. If I did, I would be working as Unai is on his would I be working in their staff? Probably not, because I'm certainly not qualified. But those are that is the big question, though. So
Hayden says, it's summer 2025. Haaland moves to Real Madrid. To replace him, Man City offer 80 million for Ollie Watkins. Do you accept? And if so, do you replace him or trust John Duran? Before you answer, Rory, another fan, replied on Twitter saying, summer 2025, Watkins is 30. We aren't getting 80 million for him. But if someone does offer that, absolutely yes. Duran starts and we sign Mbeumo with the funds. I think that follow-up point is right. I'm not sure we get, unless Ollie Watkins has an unbelievable season, I'm not sure he gets an offer of 80 million at 30. I don't think it feels quite steep.
Watkins' market value must be that, though, because he is second or
I
third.
think Villa would ask for that, but whether they would actually get it is a different matter, I think.
The situation here is that Villa and Monchi and Damian, made this very clear. If they are in any trouble regarding, if they have to raise any funds, which, by the way, they said they don't know yet regarding next summer, because mainly the Champions League is a big factor in what they have to do. So if they win lots of games in the Champions League, obviously boost their revenue by millions of pounds. However, they always say that, what the key thing is they don't want to strip any, crucial players. As I said earlier in the episode, Martinez obviously just signed a new deal. Watkins signed a new deal recently as well. He obviously wants to become the club's leading goal scorer, so he'll have no appetite to leave. However, if of course he achieves that and Villa receive a huge offer, so let's say £80 million, obviously there'd be a conversation, because Villa, we know, obviously don't have that Jack Grealish roll-on effect from 3 years prior to this year. So that is the kind of hole they're working with at the moment. Do I think Villa will have to sell someone next summer? Possibly, again, depending on certain things. But if they want to continue to develop the squad and reinvest, there may have to be another sale. But that isn't something that I'm scared of whatsoever. I don't know what the situation is going to be like next summer, but if you're putting down huge money for a player who is 30, then there'd be a conversation. There has to be. And then Inderan, as we all know, is a player that could start for most Premier League teams. Obviously doesn't start for us because we have Ollie Watkins, Newcastle have Alexander Isak, Liverpool don't quite play with a striker. So as you kind of go through them, but Chelsea, he'd be starting for Man United, he'd be pushing Solanke at Tottenham. And as Damian and Monchi said, 40 clubs are after him in the summer. He is the hot property. He is the prospect. And I say prospect, at the age of 20, he has the capacity to lead our line. He's a sensational player. And yes, a lot of people, it was quite divisive, I suppose, in some ways. And, a lot of people rate him as well. But I think we're actually seeing much more from him now as well. It's scary to think about what he could be even in 1 year, let alone 4 years. Seriously, incredible. So I'd be absolutely more than happy to see him lead our line if Watkins was to leave next summer. And that isn't me saying that's going to happen. However, as you say, Dan, as the question asks, if Villa received a massive offer that they couldn't turn down, then there'd obviously be a conversation about it, as there would be for any player.
At any club, pretty much.
Like they had approaches for Martinez, for Jacob Ramsey last summer. Emery said no, don't sell Ramsey, and obviously Martinez is absolutely crucial for the for the dressing room, the mentality, etc. So those players weren't for sale, as was Watkins. But things change in football, obviously. I don't know, maybe we could even see it, and this isn't anything I'd want either, but maybe you'd see Duran go if there was a massive offer that they couldn't turn down. But again, all these situations are in the backdrop of PSR, and Villa will have to raise money to invest big in their squad like they did in the summer. But as I kind of keep trying to clarify here, Villa don't want to sell their key players. And if they did, it would be for a huge sum, unless they're kind of facing that points deduction like they did with the Louise sale. But that is something that we really don't know as of yet. It's far too early to estimate that.
Onto the silly questions, John. I always like to try and include at least one, sometimes two. I put a tweet out separately because of the 30-odd replies. They're all actual football questions. And, I like to introduce a bit of silliness.
I didn't see this myself, so you put out a separate tweet.
I put a separate tweet saying I could do with a silly question if someone could, put one up. And I got 11, which obviously we're not going to do all 11 now, but I've got them all in a document that I'm going to save and come back to. And I'll keep adding to it. So I want you at random to pick me two numbers between 1 and 11, and I'll go to that question. So this could be anything.
1 and 11.
Okay, first of all then, from Matt says, I love this. This isn't a silly question. This is proper. Which of these Champions League foods are you picking? Okay. Swiss cheese, Young Boys. Bavarian sausage, Bayern Munich. Sauerkraut, Leipzig. Italian bolognese, Bologna, obviously. Margarita pizza, Juventus. Belgian chocolate, Brugge. French profiteroles, Monaco. Or haggis, neeps and tatties, Celtic.
Yeah. I was thinking, who's the last one? And then I remembered, it's not going to be them. I don't like cheese. I had a bratwurst when I got into Frankfurt
Okay, good.
last night in my connecting flight, so I'd definitely say the Bavarian sausage, and I'll go for bolognese as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Not a fan of haggis, neeps, and tatties.
To be fair, I've never had haggis. I might like it, to be fair.
I doubt
I do
that
like
very
it.
much, given your track record.
No, mate, you'd be surprised. It's just that I have. I don't know how to put this. I do like my meats.
Do you know what neeps and tatties is?
Have we said leeks?
No, neeps. Neeps. I've heard of it. Tatties is obviously potato, but I don't know what neeps is. I assume it's like a bubble and squeak kind of thing is what I'm picturing.
Looks like a vegetable of some sort that's been mashed. It looks decent haggis, to be fair.
Okay, next question. The other number you picked, can't remember, 11, I think. Good. From Tom, says, will John legally change his name to John with an H if Duran bags at least 10 goals in all competitions? He's already on 3 or 4, isn't he?
Yeah, mate, it would be like 40 goals in all competitions, I think.
You wouldn't even change your Twitter name, never mind your legal name.
That Twitter name, I was going to change it when we signed John Duran, and I thought, no, it's a bit early. And then he did it against Liverpool, and I was going to do it, and then I thought, no, I've got to remain professional. Do I have to remain professional on Twitter? Probably, but
no.
I should have done it after the Everton game. It depends. It depends on the context. John Duran keeps outdoing himself. He scores obviously a worldie of a goal against Everton. And you're thinking, how does he improve on that? He scores against Young Boys, great finish, and celebrates in front of the ultras. Then he gets ruled out. Like, where does he go from here? Whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be crazy enough to change my name then.
The final part of the show is the comment of the week, and it comes from Barry Gribben, who says, superb podcast as always, lads. One question from me. Not being English and having never lived in England, what impact does being based in Birmingham have on PSR, revenue, and the ability to attract players? I hear you regularly talking about the London and Manchester clubs having an advantage in this, but why is it the case? Birmingham is the so-called second city, so why do Villa struggle when compared to these clubs and regions in footballing monetary terms? Now, I replied to Barry on YouTube last week with a bit of an answer, but I thought it deserved being a bit more fleshed out on the podcast, partly because you kind of take for granted that everyone knows everything that you're saying. Like, we say things like, London is more attractive, and you just don't think anything of it. But there'll be some people out there that, like Barry, go, well, why is that? And we just don't ever explain it because we just take it as read that people will know what we mean, when obviously that's not the case. So I started to apply a little bit. Obviously, London is attractive to players because it's London, it's the capital, it's flashy, whatever. But also the second part about PSR and revenue in regards to things like ticket prices is that obviously if you live in London, things are more expensive, but the jobs pay more. So if you get London prices, you've got a London wage. Whereas when we say that, we're getting London prices at Villa Park in terms of tickets, but it's not a London wage. The Birmingham average wage is much lower than London, so the prices don't reflect the money that people are earning. So all those things come into account when we talk about Villa making more money and whatever else. But also from a player perspective, it's a much more attractive proposition to live in London than it is in Birmingham.
Obviously, I think London clubs as well can be more attractive to fans from other countries as well. Obviously, the question here from, what was the chap's name again, sorry?
Barry.
Obviously, the question from Barry, he lives in a different country, so I'm just on my feet. I'm sitting on the floor with 2 boxes holding my... Good question from Barry. And I think the key point here is that, I always look at Tottenham as and West Ham to a degree, but especially Tottenham. They were no further in front of us when we were under O'Neill. In fact, they were below us, beneath us. They were fighting relegation for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, because I think they're in London, they managed to get lots of attention from, be it, again, fans from other countries. They can move stadium into this new big shiny thing. They get more investment from sponsors because, again, it's London. It's just more attractive for the stakeholders who can make you build your revenue, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that Villa, I think the world is a much smaller place now, and I think people are starting to see the opportunity in Birmingham. You've obviously got the 2 Manchester clubs, Abu Dhabi, I think who bought City. They saw that as an opportunity because it's next to United as well. obviously we're now owned by the second richest man in Africa, in Sawiris. Obviously got Eden's on board. We're a hugely wealthy club. Well, hugely wealthy club. A lot of fans won't want me to say this, but Birmingham as well. You know, they have investment from people who are well known abroad. Put it that way. There's a reason why a club in Birmingham, Small Heath, are being taken over instead of Bolton, for example. So I think people are starting to see the opportunity in Birmingham, like we have. Like NSW we have, not just because we're in the Championship, but there's a massive infrastructure project there as well, if they want it, and they're taking advantage of it. And everything else comes with the history of the club. But yeah, just in terms of London, obviously their costs are greater as well. You know, running Arsenal Stadium will be much more than what it is for Villa Park. But yeah, obviously employees are paid more as well. But that's because you say they're based in London, they have more opportunity for investment and stuff like that. But just in terms of the question, one big reason why we were so outraged by the prices is firstly because it's much more than those clubs. And then on top of the fact that we earn less, or, you know, the average is less than fans who watch those teams. So that's, what we mean by London prices.
Yeah, okay. Well, a nice place to end. John, thanks for your time as always. It's been good to get you back on the podcast. Feels like you've only been gone away like less than a week, but you missed like 4 episodes. So it is weird because it's normally you and me on every week. So nice to have you back, mate. Thanks for joining me.
When am I next back? Oh, Friday.
Tomorrow.
Oh my God. Whoa, wow.
Yeah, there's very little shelf life on this episode because we'll be back Friday evening for the pre-Wolves preview, post-presser preview. What am I talking about? 6:30 we'll be live on YouTube on Friday evening. Saturday is Wolves at home, a 3 o'clock kickoff. So Matt Kendrick and I will do the post-match show at 7ish, 7:30, something like that. So another couple of videos coming over the next couple of days. And then you and I, John, will be in the office at Bodymoor Heath Studios on Monday for another Q&A. We'll do another one. So any questions I didn't get round to today, we'll discuss them and more on Monday. John, thanks for joining me. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Claret and Blue podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow.